1 2 1 2 sound check 1 2 1 2 1 2 sound check 1 2 Royal Blue podcast live 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Royal Blue podcast. It is the Monday show. We are live, and I am your host, Ian Croll. Joining me on today's show to talk all things Everton, we have the Echoes Everton FC correspondent, home and away, Joe Thomas. Joe, how are things? All good?
Yeah, very good. Cheers. Thanks, Ian.
Good. Holding the fort all by yourself while Chris Beasley swans it away on holiday again.
That's it.
He hasn't worked in weeks, has he?
I don't think he has, shocking.
I can't even remember last time he was on the pod, to be honest. But yeah, keep an eye out for all of Joe's articles on the Liverpool Echo website. I think Chris is back in the next couple of days, and I'm sure we'll get him on a podcast. And last by no means least, we'll introduce Gav Buckland. Gav, how are things? All good? Good weekend?
Nice to see, yeah, it was okay. Yeah. I didn't get to the Roma game for a number of reasons, but all looking forward to the start of the new season, proper.
Yeah, this probably, although we did have an Everton game, that was probably the last weekend where anxiety and dread and stress is out the window until this Saturday. It's gonna be an interesting one, isn't it? Okay, well, the usual housekeeping and plugs to start off with. Please give us a like, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube. And if you haven't already, go and subscribe to the Royal Blue channel on YouTube. And as mentioned, we are live, so get your questions and get your comments in on the stream, and we'll read them out at the end of the podcast in the quickfire segments of questions. And of course, to our listeners listening on Spotify and Apple Pods, leave us a 5-star review. Doing so will make us look really good, won't it, Joe? To the agenda then, it's the Monday after Everton's 1-1 draw with Roma in the final pre-season friendly before the Brighton game. So we'll start off with reaction to that. And we've also got reports claiming John Textor is back in the frame to buy a majority stake in the club. So Takeover Talk is also on the agenda. We've also got a new points deduction threat, apparently, so we'll get the latest on that. And in the second half of the pod, which is going to be my favourite part of the podcast, to be honest, it's going to be our predictions for the 2024-2025 season. So there is a lot to get through. People are joining the stream now. So again, as mentioned, if you're only literally just joined in the last second, get involved, get your comments in, get your questions in, and I'll read them out to the lads over the course of the show. Joe, then we'll start with you. It was Roma on Saturday at 5 o'clock. Good workout for Everton ahead of the start of the Premier League season. I only saw the first half because I was in the office working on Everton's live stream on the website, but probably missed the best half, to be honest, didn't I?
Yeah, definitely. First half wasn't the best. First hour probably wasn't really the best. I think we had a good snapshot as to, albeit Everton have a couple of injuries at the minute, I think we probably saw where Everton are, I think, in that final pre-season game. That first hour, it was difficult. They laboured a little bit. I think we have to remember that Roma are probably a couple of steps ahead of where Everton are. Roma right now, obviously they finished 6th in the last few seasons in Serie A, so they're a consistent European outfit. They've got some really good players. They just signed a striker on big money in Artem Dovbyk, the Ukrainian international. So I think Roma, and I think this is important context for what I'm about to say, is I think Roma are probably where Everton might want to be 1 or 2 years into the new stadium. And where hopefully that transition into the new ground, the opportunities that will open up will help Everton take to that position. So it was probably Everton, the equivalent of Everton playing someone like maybe a Spurs or an Aston Villa at this present moment in time. So I think it's right to see that Everton, particularly with some of the injuries they've got, there's perhaps a little bit of underdogs, and I think that played out in the first half. They persevered well, they worked hard, but Roma were the better side. Scored a wonderful goal. Pellegrini drifted behind the back four. Probably should have been tracked. That wasn't great defending, but his first touch, the way he brought the ball down, was just spectacular, and it gave him all the time to then pick a spot past Pickford, who obviously returned for the first time of pre-season after having come back to Finch Farm last Monday. Artem Dovbyk probably could have scored 2, certainly should have scored 1. And I think Everton, they worked hard, and they put some dangerous balls into the box, 2 to the back post, one that McNeil and one that Calvert-Lewin couldn't quite get on the end of. So there were glimpses there, but it felt a little bit like Roma were the better side, and when they really wanted to create a chance, they tended to be able to. Game then completely changed with Dominic Calvert-Lewin's goal. So first 10 minutes, second half, the game's drifting a little bit more intensity from Everton, and then Calvert-Lewin probably showed us just everything that we know he can do and why he holds so much value to this Everton side, regardless of what they see him as wanting to do over the course of next year. And it's important context for his for his future, because I think we saw in the goal the way in which he leapt on an opportunity, got behind the back four. He held off Evan Ndicka, who's a Serie A and a European experienced centre back. He held them off with ease, twisted inside and got into the box and finished. And Everton don't have that in the squad from anybody else. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't think they'll be able to get that into the squad for what finances are probably going to be available towards the end of the season, even if they did sell Calvert-Lewin. So it all fits into that picture of why it's so troublesome trying to work out what the best thing to do with his situation is. But that changed the game then. And that came without anything having really changed, without changes to the personnel, also makeup. But in the aftermath of that, Dyche then made some changes, and then we saw the glimpse of what could be the new Everton when Jesper Lindstrom comes on, Iliman Ndiaye comes on, Jack Harrison goes into the middle. They played a little bit with Calvert-Lewin in front of them, and it just transformed the side. All of a sudden you had a side with some creativity, some guile, some skullduggery. They could create things. Iliman Ndiaye, a player that's happy to, he can beat a man. How rare has it been that we've seen an Everton player beat a man in the middle of the pitch? And obviously we know that comes with risk. We know that's something that Dyche doesn't necessarily like to see in his players, but we also know how much that can influence a side and the crowd. Iliman Ndiaye changed the nature of that game, or took it on after Calvert-Lewin changed the nature of the game. Last half an hour, Everton had the initiative, and Ndiaye forced a good save, set up Jack Harrison, forced another good save. Everton could have won at the end. They didn't, and they still looked a little bit flaky at the back as they tried to go forward. But I think by the end of it, you could sell a relatively positive narrative about what Everton could be. But that game in a nutshell, I think, is probably going to be one of the big questions going into the season, which we'll probably come on to later. That stick or twist for Dyche. I think in the back of his mind going into Saturday, there's probably a little bit of a fear that Roma they're just a better side with some more talented players. Nobody wants to turn up to Goodison a week before the start of the season and see Everton lose 2-3, 4-0. I'm not saying that would have happened, but I think that coloured some of his ideas, and particularly in playing. Decore played in that kind of third centre midfielder / support role, which he's made his own and done so well in over the past 2 years under Dyche. Yeah. But it's so important there because of his defensive work. And I think the big question for Everton now is it feels like for the first time they have genuine weapons if they want to play someone like Harrison or Ndiaye there instead. But obviously doing that sacrifices what Decore brings defensively and then opens up more problems at the back. So it's, where do you go? Do you have a bit of a evolution? Do you become a little bit more attacking? But it looks difficult to do that in half measure. So where's Dyche going to go with that? And I think that's going to be one of the big questions.
Okay, well, I mean, Gav, you obviously didn't. You said you didn't watch the game, but just on Calvert-Lewin, he's had a tough pre-season. You knew I was going to come to Calvert-Lewin straight away, didn't you? Now he's had a tough
standing agenda item, isn't it, on the pod?
I think this is all positive. He's had a tough pre-season, but the past 2 games it's looked slightly more positive because he scored goals. But that's just all you want Calvert-Lewin to do, isn't it? Can he take that now into?
I want to do more than score goals. I want him to be the focal point of the attack as well. Going back to Joe's point, though, actually we want to try and move away from that, don't we? Where actually we've got a few more strings to our bow up front. Yeah, it was encouraging. I've seen the goal. It was a good take and finish, wasn't it? From him? Possibly thought the goalie should have done better, but that's just
did that just the wrong way?
Yeah.
Whoa! Or did Calvert-Lewin send him the wrong way? Come on.
Yeah. He did.
You have to ask him. Did you ask him?
He did fool the keeper, I think, a little bit. I'm being a bit harsh on the keeper, to be fair. And that was good, but it doesn't change the narrative, does it? Really around his immediate future, which we've spoken about ad nauseam on the pod over the last month or two. But it shows you a glimpse of what he does bring to the team, and his goal scoring capacity is there. And it's frustrating that we don't see enough of that. Possibly those types of finishes we saw on Saturday. That's been a weakness for me over the years. As I said before, one of his weaknesses. I know players have weaknesses. Is that ability to make goals on your own. To do the hard yards yourself and make opportunities for yourself as a player and as a striker. And he hasn't done that enough for me, but he did that well on Saturday. And that's the type of thing that's been lacking in the past, and it would be good to see that in the future for Everton. Hopefully, perhaps supporters would say, or at least if he went somewhere else, we get a decent fee on the back of that.
Well, one thing you said about Calvert-Lewin a while back, and it's one of the very few things I agree with you about.
That's fine. What pods are for to disagree?
No, I know, I'm only joking. Is that when he was going through the Barron spell, I think it was like 18, 19 games, something like that, you said, well, Calvert-Lewin, the way you described that, I was like, my God, Gav's right. He
doesn't happen very often, that
he scores goals in bursts, like
he does,
4 or 5 games, and then he'll go like a ridiculous amount of games without scoring goals. I mean, he needs to get out of that and just be more consistent, doesn't he?
His entire career, if you have a look at his Everton record over the last 5 or 6 years, it's based around 2, possibly 3 periods of productivity in front of goal. First was when Carlo took over 1920 over that Christmas period and going into January. Then at the start of the 2021 season, where it was all a bit of I wouldn't say it was false football, but coming out of COVID, teams were underprepared and so on, and defences weren't perhaps as well told as what they normally are, and Calvert-Lewin took advantage of that. Had a great start to the season, but then tailed off. And those 2 big periods for him have masked his deficiencies, goal scoring wise, when you see his record. And he's had a couple of bursts since last October, November, so 4 and 5. And that's the thing he needs to do. The problem is at 27. Are you going to change? A bit like managers, I always say, don't change the spots. To strikers all of a sudden become far better and far more productive. I'm not so sure, but he has got the ability to do that. Like the thing about Calvert-Lewin, I'd say about fees and stuff, the Solanke fee was rather, put the sort of. I know Dominic's got a year left on his contract. They would play. I think he's in under 20s together with for England. Solanke on the back of 1 good season for Bournemouth, and I think he has got a bit more strings to his bow than Calvert-Lewin, to be fair. 60-odd million quid, that's a hell of a fee when we're talking about what Dominic's worth with 1 year left on his contract. Perhaps we need to revisit that, and I'm sure if somebody comes to buy him, Everton will be referring them to the 65 million that Spurs have just spent on Solanke. I know, it's not necessarily 65 million up front, but that was the other Calvert-Lewin linked news of the week, I thought. But that was it. Going back to your original question, it was good to see him get a goal, and he's got 2 and 2.
Definitely. I was having conversations with people about the Tottenham signing, and they always seem to overpay on players regardless anyway. But if that's where the market is at, 65 million. I know it's 55 plus add-ons, but for a 19 goal a season striker, we've got no chance of getting
1 season striker. You mean? Yeah, exactly. And it does show you. I suppose what it shows is goal scorers are at a premium, aren't they? And English goal scorers even more of a premium.
Well, if you look at what West Ham have done, they just spent £27 million on Nicholas Fulcrook, who's 31. For Dortmund.
Yeah.
And they're one of the clubs that was in the market for Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
Yeah.
I mean, they've paid a lot of money and given a big contract to a player that's 4 years older than Dominic Calvert-Lewin there and has no track record of being in the Premier League. So, I mean, I think it's fair to say that the forward market is distorted at the minute. And I think when it comes to Calvert-Lewin, I think Everton are more likely to be a victim of that rather than a beneficiary of that, because there's a danger that they kind of almost get caught in the pincer where they end up having to lose Dominic Calvert-Lewin for less than he's worth because of his contract situation, and have to look to replace him in a market where they need to spend over the odds to then try and get what they can. And that's the problem that Everton find themselves in.
Absolutely. Before we move on then to takeover talk, just finally, Gav, Joe's already touched upon it, but excuse me, Iliman and Dai, really positive, performance in the second half against Roma. Is he the one for you? out of the new players that looks like he could be the most creative and the one who could change a game if needed to be, if you're 1-1 at Goodison or 1-0 down.
I've not seen enough, and I don't think we've seen enough of the players to pass judgment on that, to be fair. The clips I saw on Saturday were encouraging. We have to bear in mind, though, like some of the new signings, they'll welcome their youth and the fact that we bought them relatively cheaply and there's a lot of promise there. There's also a lot of inexperience there. There's nothing. Ken Dyer's only played in one Premier League game. He played for Sheffield United, which, we know the Premier League is quite a challenging league. And so I'll reserve judgment on that. But what I saw on Saturday, albeit limited highlights and what I've heard about him in the past, I think there's a player there that will be useful to us and offers something that we, as Joe was alluding to, we've not had in the past. And I think Joe's right, is like that the stick or twist for Dyche could determine how well the season goes. Now we're going to talk about predictions later, but it's how much he's prepared to gamble.
That's
isn't
the
it,
issue
really?
for Dyche now, and I think Iliman Ndiaye is certainly someone who can get the crowd on their feet, and he's someone that can probably provide a little bit of magic and creativity. I mean, we talk about Calvert-Lewin scoring in bursts, and the different kind of phases of his career so far. Another way of looking at it is when under Ancelotti a team is set up to provide him with opportunities, he takes them, and under Dyche quite often he's almost more of a defensive striker in the sense that it's what he does for the team rather than anything else. But Iliman Ndiaye is someone who I think could help to give someone like Dominic Calvert-Lewin more opportunities, which is interesting. But that experience thing you say is really interesting because, I've spoken a lot to Sean Dyche this season. Only reporter who's been to every single pre-season game, and I spoke to him after every single one. And I think something that we probably need to... it's worth fans being a little bit patient over, or at least being aware of this, is that this talk of experience is going to factor in, Premier League experience is going to factor into what he does, certainly in the opening weeks of the season. At the minute, Jarrad Branthwaite's out injured with a groin injury. Now, I spoke to him after the game the other day. He doesn't expect Branthwaite to be back for Brighton on Saturday. He does expect Michael Keane to be back. Now, there'll be a lot of people on this that have already made up their mind about Michael Keane and might be thinking, well, Everton just spent £15 million on Jake O'Brien, surely he's going to start. But when you look throughout the side, I think what Sean Dyche is going to do, one of the things he is slightly concerned about with the new signings so far is the fact that, with the exception of Jack Harrison, none of them have real significant Premier League experience. Now, the injury is going to dictate what he can and can't do. But if, and there's a chance he might have to, say, perhaps play Timo Robenham, who's had a good pre-season, but still very young and inexperienced, if he has to play him in the centre midfield, that might have a knock-on effect to what he does at the back. Will he want Robenham making his Premier League? He's trying to finally, he has played in the Premier, but trying to break through in the Premier League in the middle of the pitch, and then Jake O'Brien, who's never played a Premier League game before, behind him at the back. Or will he look for someone like Michael Keane, who he trusts and who he has openly said he believes has had a good pre-season? I actually agree with that. I think Michael Keane has had a good pre-season. I think he's played quite well and been a little bit unfortunate, because I think on the flip side, I think Mason Holgate had a bad pre-season. And I think that coloured a lot bit of some of the impression of Keane in some of those opening games. You then look at Iliman Ndiaye. I think a lot, especially after the last half an hour yesterday on Saturday, there'll be huge demand to start Iliman Ndiaye.
Yeah.
Again, it's a knock-on effect. Like, we know Decore doesn't offer as much going forward, but all these different decisions are going to have a knock-on effect on each other. I think what I'd probably say is, despite probably a lot of people hoping this might be the case, don't expect to walk into Goodison Park at 2:00 on Saturday and see Iliman Ndiaye, Timo Robenham and Jake O'Brien all in the starting lineup. He might do. I mean, Keane might not even make it back. He's due to return to train either today or tomorrow, and they think it was only a minor issue that kept him out of Roma. But he might not even be back, so there might not even be a choice to make. But don't be too surprised if you see that. And, I can understand
absolutely
why Dyche might think that. We know inherently he's cautious. We know how important it's going to be for Everton to get off to a good start this season, final season at Goodison Park. We know how bad some of the previous seasons have been. And also we know, a bit like last season, how much, when we start to get into the winter months, the fixtures turn. I know we've got some tricky away games early doors in the season, but it does feel like it would be useful in the first 2 months of the season to build up a little stockpile of points for that insane start to December where Everton play, I think, Liverpool, Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea and City all in the space of about 5 or 6 weeks. Everton could go and take points off all of them. We know that, but obviously we don't want to be relying on that.
Did you notice at the start of that, Joe was like, I'm the only Everton reporter to have been to all pre-season games.
That's why you should listen to this podcast. To
Exactly,
get that
exactly.
Absolutely.
We know how our Joe works.
There we go.
I did one question on that, Joe. I was going to ask. You've seen all the games, and you say you say about pre-season how useful it is, or perhaps not. Have you seen a noticeable increase in the fitness of the players across the last 2 or 3 weeks of games, or
not necessarily?
Yeah.
I think where the change that because I think Dyche focuses on fitness all the way through anyway, and I think that up until probably Preston, it was all fitness, and I don't think he didn't want or like how bad it got against Coventry. I think that was perhaps a low point which worried him a little bit. He wanted to see more from the players, even though it wasn't a result that he was focused on, and that perhaps coloured a bit of the reaction against Preston when they then played well. That was the first time he started probably a strong team, and he had a little bit more of a play around. I think the team have always been pretty sharp on fitness. I think they will start the season one of the fitter ones. I think where things have been refined over the final week of pre-season is kind of more tactically. I think the base level of fitness has always been decent. I think where the progress has been is on the tactical side and his understanding of players. I think that's where the progress has been, and I think they have finished pre-season quite strongly. And I think I think Roma was probably an accurate assessment as to where they probably are. Like I said at the start of this, it's almost like them playing a side that's a Europa League side that's knocking on the door of the Champions League side, and you have to kind of bear that in mind. I've got a few injuries as well, which doesn't help. So I think they will be fit. I think against Preston you noticed that. We expect that. One of the things that the Dyche side, and I think we all know this now. I know it's a cliche. I know we'll hear it so many times this season. The control of controllables. Dyche is still in the mindset of, even though Everton have been a bit more proactive this summer than I think we all expected them to be, Dyche is still in the mindset that there are so many things outside of his control at this club and around this club, and also the roller coaster of a Premier League season, that his focus will be on the things that he can, and one of the things he can control is trying to get that group of players as fit as possible. Yeah. That's why we perhaps saw things like Gaffer's Day. He did 2 Gaffer's Day for the first time this time round. And I think that was out of a desire to make sure that, because there have been a few players with a few niggles, that everybody he could get in front of that bleep test or the yo-yo test, whatever, got it. There was, no one was able to kind of shirk it if they had a minor knock. There were 2 goes at it. So.
Okay, well, let's move on from Roma, and we'll talk a little bit of takeover news. Just to add a little bit of context, I'm sure everyone knows anyway, but I'll just read a paragraph from our live blog regarding Textor. So it reads, in a new interview, John Textor has confirmed he wants to buy a majority shareholding in Everton. The American billionaire had been previously tipped to make a takeover bid for the Blues, and then before Mashiri entered into exclusivity talks with the Freakin Group, which has obviously since collapsed. Another paragraph, there has been new reports claiming the Freakin Group are now looking to buy a minority stake in the club. So takeover talk has reared again, Joe.
Yep.
What's going on, basically?
Yeah, not as much as you might think if you look at some of the headlines. And I think we'll get onto this probably in more detail when we talk onto the the alleged new points deduction threat. I think people probably have to be wary at this stage of season, after a summer of the Euros, a summer of the Olympics. All of a sudden, attention at news desks around the country, and therefore the opportunities as well with some of the blogging websites. All of a sudden returns very quickly back to the Premier League, and people are looking for what they can sweep up and what new lines they can repackage, and quite often there isn't as much new stuff in there. With the takeover stuff, it's still quiet on that front. I think there may be some interested parties, but I don't think there's been any significant movement at the minute, and I don't think there's expected to be any from the talks that have happened so far. The John Textor quotes were to the Mirror, our sister paper, and I think there are 2 ways to approach them. I think firstly, everything he says about wanting to take over Everton you have to treat with caution. It is essentially just speculation at this minute. He owns 45% of Crystal Palace. That stake is prohibitive to him doing anything formally for Everton. Now, Textor was on the scene after the 777 collapse. I mean, it was his public comments about how good an opportunity he believed Everton were that probably kick-started the flurry of interest that we then saw of genuine bids, and he put in himself into the mix there. But I think that he never really got past the opening hurdles with Moshiri because he's still got the stake in Palace. So, until he sells that, and he is trying to sell that, but I mean that's a process which could take months, even now, months after he originally came on the scene. So whilst there might be a willingness and a desire there, the ability to act on it, unless he can negotiate some sort of, breakthrough with the regulators where they maybe allow him to simultaneously pursue the sale of the Palace shares and the bid for Everton, and the two processes can go alongside themselves. Unless and until that happens, he should stand on the sidelines and can't really do anything about it. The second thing I'd say about Textor, though, is, and I think this is where we can take positives, is a little bit like when he came to the table earlier on this year, is what it does show is the some sensible football people, some rich people that have a track record in football, and I think it's probably know what they're talking about when it comes to club ownership because he has a portfolio. There are still some people that believe that Everton is an asset and Everton is an opportunity, and if the opportunities arose, they might be looking to do it. Now, will Textor ever be in a position to do that? Maybe, maybe not. I think Everton could probably do with a little bit of movement on this towards the back end of this summer, really, and that might still be too early for Textor. But I think we can at least take some heart by what he's saying about Everton Football Club as an opportunity, because he will have a lot of awareness of of the financials at the club and the issues that they're freaking out. Obviously, he hasn't had exclusivity, so he won't have all the details. But he isn't saying those words to the mirror being unaware of why the Freaking Group pulled out of their deal. So there must be some degree of hope that he could maybe pull something off. But in relation to him specifically, I think that his interest has never waned on Everton. I think he's always remained on the scene, but just like it did after the collapse of the 777 group and their deal, he can't really make good on that at the minute. So, take heart from the positive vibes he has towards Everton, but treat it with caution, because in a minute he's powerless to do anything. And just before you go to Gav on this, because very interested to hear his take on all this as well, just on the Freaking Group, seen a few reports today that they might be interested in returning to the table for a minority stake for Everton. I don't think that's the case. Current understanding at the minute is that at this stage they're not interested in that. Could we see a scenario maybe down the line where a couple of investors get together and think that maybe if they spread the risk between themselves, they could take on Everton? Maybe. And could the Freaking Group be part of that? Possibly, I suppose. We know they've been interested in Everton in the past. But, from the conversations that I've had, in the wake of those reports, my current understanding is that that's not something that they're pursuing right now.
Just quickly, you made the point that if Textor wanted to buy the club and wanted to pursue it, he might be able to come to some agreement with the Premier League, because he's obviously owns 45% of Crystal Palace. Would that come in the shape of the director's test, or would that have to be a pre-agreement before?
Well, I didn't say he might be able to. I said he would probably need to be able to.
That's what I mean. So
if he was to pursue anything, how that would work, I've got absolutely no idea. But I think if he was serious, I think he possibly tried to explore this during the last period of interest, which the Freaking Group emerged as the best place from it, and he didn't really get anywhere. And I think that behind closed doors, I think the Moshiri and the people around him struggled to take the Textor bid seriously because they knew of this hurdle that really couldn't be taken, couldn't get over. But would there be a case for I would like to think that we know the situation Everton are in, and we know that short term the club says that they're fine. Long term, there are clear question marks about the ownership, and the longer that uncertainty goes on for, the bigger question marks there are about the finances. Well, if things were looking grim, and we're not at that stage yet, but a sensible bidder with a lot of money wants to go to the Premier League and a good track record, and who the Premier League have a knowledge and awareness of working with, if they were to turn to the table and look, I think I can solve this problem, can we just have a little bit of leniency? And I'd like to think they'd at least have a conversation about seeing if there's a way in which they can, protect overlapping interests from undermining the integrity of the Premier League, but perhaps offer a solution to this process which maybe sees Everton be in a much more stable position in the long term. I'd like to think they'd at least have the conversation.
I mean, Gav, you can't really take Textor seriously, can you, at this moment in time? Like, he's still involved in another club. He keeps coming out talking about Everton, glowingly, by the way, which is fine. That's all good. But we really need serious, contenders.
Vegan interest is what we want, isn't it? But I mean, it's a reminder of this though. There's a lot of heavy lifting involved in buying Everton, isn't there? I mean, for Textor himself, even before he considers buying, he's got 45% of Palace. He can't have more than 9.9% of his share in another club. So he's got to get rid of that, hasn't he? He funded that on debt, so it's whether he's then got the capital to do. There's a few things to be done when you buy. If you get into Everton, you've got to pay the Freakin Group off. Then you've got the and any interest on their loan. Then you obviously got this 777 issue and their loan, which we don't need to go into again. And then you've got the Leadenhall case hanging over and all that legal stuff that got in the way of the Freakin takeover. So, and then you've got to fund possibly the stadium and all that type of thing Joe was alluding to about the cash for the club in the medium to long term. So there's a lot of baggage there, isn't there? There's a lot of things to do. That takes money to do that, and whether he's got that is another thing that's worth adding. Having said all that, it is encouraging that there are people out there still expressing an interest, and I've still got a funny feeling that this Leadenhall case goes away, but it sort of becomes less of an issue. Can you see the Freakin Group coming back? Possibly, I don't know, but I think that would be helpful if that is cleared up. But that's not going to happen anytime soon, is it really? So, it's good that he's interested, but I at this stage I can't really see it happening for all those reasons. But that's not the end of the road for us from the ownership issue, is it? I think there's other people out there who'll hopefully come to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I know Joe's touched upon the Freakin 30% minority stake, potentially coming into play, but do you want to be a partner with Mashiri after everything that's gone on?
What you would expect then is somebody else would become the majority shareholder. Like Textor's got 45% of Palace, hasn't he? He's the majority. That's somebody buy 50% of the club. And as Joe was saying there, you could a consortium of maybe three major shareholders that share the risk. Perhaps might be an option going forward, or the scenario going forward that will work for everybody. Mashiri could still be a shareholder within that, I suppose. But we'll just have to wait and see. It is encouraging, but to see him saying nice things, but I don't think he's got the wherewithal and the opportunity at the moment. But it's good to see that people are expressing an interest, because we're still a viable Premier League club, aren't we, to buy into?
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously something that's going to roll on and on, Joe, isn't it? Anything else that we need to talk about with regards to the takeover before we move on to our favourite points deduction?
No, let's get on to the points deduction next, I think.
Okay. Again, I'll just add a little bit of context if you don't know already. I'll read a couple of paragraphs from a Liverpool Echo article. So, reports emerge claiming the Blues could be hit with a new points deduction on the eve of the new Premier League campaign. However, Everton remain confident the club will be able to defend itself in any outstanding financial debate with the Premier League if it does eventually take place. I mean, first off, this is something that has been delayed by quite a long time. It should have been sorted out, a couple of months back. I know, Gav, you previously spoke how
end of last season
frustrated,
by May.
How frustrated you've been with the Premier League. There's no excuses whatsoever, but obviously, from playing devil's advocate, if you want to say that, the Premier League have got a lot on the hands with Manchester City, but that should not excuse anything in regards to this case. Everton need this sort, and don't they? But reports emerged over the weekend that Everton could face a points deduction. But we've known this anyway, haven't we?
Yeah, well, probably best to start with the beginning. So a few reports from some organisations came out of the weekend presenting this as if it was perhaps new information, and it's not. The threat that is being referred to is one that has existed since April and that we've known about, and which has been no movement on. So there has been no new development that has led to a new threat emerging. Yeah. There has been, and there remains the existing threat that has remained in place since April. So I think we'll go through the points deduction threats that could exist one by one, and I'll come to the main one last. But from a PSR perspective, there are three potential avenues through which Everton could get a points deduction. One is the financial year that ended in the summer, so ended a couple of months ago. We know Everton had a lot of work to do to try and get within that £105 million parameter. They probably had about almost £40 million of wriggle room on the PSR situation. The club think that they got within those limits. They got that late business with the sales of Lewis Dobbin and Ben Godfrey over the line. They think that brought them within the parameters. So they, on their reading of the situation, when the next set of PSR scrutiny comes at the end of this year, beginning of next year, the club believes that there's no threat of Everton getting a new deduction from that perspective. We can't say that for certain because we have no idea of the inner workings of Everton's accounts until the accounts come out, which won't be till the end of next March. But I think, from my perspective, whilst I don't know where it's going to go, I can see a route to safety on that. I can see how Everton might have got there based on everything that we do know, which is more than we would normally know because of everything that's come out in the recent hearings. So Everton are confident, and there's reason to be hopeful, I think, that the last set of accounts won't be a problem. The next threat is the current financial year that we're in, the one that started on July the 1st and which ends at the end of next June. Now, Everton have got a lot of work to do to fall within the parameters of the £105 million. They've basically got to break even this season, certainly from a PSR perspective. There might be a little bit of wriggle room, but anyway. They've already sold Amadou Onana, so that's obviously a significant bill, and a significant influx of money. It's not enough. Most of the past few years, Everton have been there or thereabouts, or even struggled when they've had multiple significant sales, and that's just one of them. But it was a big step forward. You see the loss of the likes of Andre Gomes and Dele from the wage bill, two of the most significant contracts that have gone. You will see the benefit of some of the new, more lucrative commercial deals with the likes of Castori, the one at Aramark that we've just seen. So there remains work to do on the next phase that we're in, but Everton have made a decent start on that. So in terms of the future hearings or that might come up, I think there's reason to believe that Everton have a chance of avoiding any trouble. So where the threat does exist that we can see is on the years of already being judged by the Premier League and the independent commissions. And this kind of came to a head in April when the second points deduction was given. And the commission that ruled on that said that there's a dispute between Everton and the Premier League over the way in which the club has accounted for the interest on loans that the club says have been used specifically for the stadium. That commission decided to defer the argument. They said this is so complex that we can't have this now. We still haven't had it. And what this relates to is essentially the way in which the club has retrospectively capitalised about £6.5 million of interest payments in 21 and 22. Premier League say that they've mistreated that from an accounting perspective, and therefore one of the previous breaches could be higher. If Everton were to lose the argument on that, if the argument was to even happen, then that could then have a knock-on effect for a much bigger sum for the year that's just finished. Because you imagine that Everton, believing that they're in the right, have used the same treatment for these figures consistently and will continue to do so unless they're told it's definitely wrong. So all this comes down to a future hearing that the Premier League have said is going to happen, or the Independent Commission has said is going to happen, but still hasn't yet happened. There's no sign of it happening yet. In order for Everton to get a new points deduction, first that would have to happen. Secondly, Everton would have to lose that argument. They're confident in their case. They may well be confident in their case, let's be honest. They said they're confident over previous years, and that hasn't stopped them from getting 2 points deductions. There's only so much we can read into that. But the hearing has to take place, Everton have to lose it, and then Everton have to lose the argument over what an appropriate punishment would be. And I think that there'd be substantial mitigation for Everton to say, surely no more points deductions. Look how punishing and crippling the ones already have been on us. The points deductions last season damage things like merit payments, which cost them millions of pounds, in prize money, which then makes it becoming sustainable even harder. And also the fact that this has taken so long to resolve, the longer it goes on, the less chance Everton have to deal with the implications of losing the argument. Yeah. So the more they carry on making what the Premier League would say the same mistakes, so the less chance they have to rectify it. So I would treat these with caution. Yes, there is a threat in theory. There could be another point deduction, but a lot has to happen And for that to be the case, there's no sign of it happening yet. And probably most importantly to anybody that was worried by the reports of the weekend, nothing new has happened which suggests a points deduction is more likely. I feel like that might be very complicated. I don't know. I hope that helps.
No, I think you are right. I mean, Gav, it's clearly a story from a journalist who's got nothing else to write. It's not new information. It's not a new story. We know this is coming, or it should be coming. It's been delayed, by far too long. It doesn't get the Premier League off the hook by how much this is being delayed, does it? Because this could even potentially now, with everything that's going on, the season starts Saturday. This could even roll into next summer, potentially even into next season. That would just be ridiculous, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my main frustration was this is not Everton's behaviour or the classification of interest. It's the Premier League, and I've said this before when they were reminding clubs about the rules about swapping players.
They had time to say that, didn't they?
We keep within the rules, whilst breaking their own rule about resolving PSR issues by the end of May, which we suffer from that, don't we? As a consequence, we don't know where we stand. And for both for last year and at the moment this year, and we're already midway or near the end of a transfer window where we could resolve some of the issues if that was the case. And I have a major problem with that. So I think, and Joe said this before on the podcast, that when it comes to the crunch and we do have another hearing, whenever that ever happens, that's a major mitigation for us, isn't it? The fact that we've not been able to resolve with you in a timely manner our financial issues over these interest payments, and that means we're at risk of breaching PSR again, and some of that Premier League is on your court. The ball is in your court on that, and I would play hardball, especially. And I don't want to get into other clubs, but we do know there's stories out there about other clubs, the way the Premier League has dealt with their PSR issues, and the clubs I'm talking about there. And I think we that would be my defence. Having said that, it's going to be an interesting one, isn't it? This, because the difference is on this hearing is the accounts are being audited, and the auditors are happy that we've treated in accounting fashion the interest payments on the stadium, i.e. the stadium related costs, and therefore don't go towards PSR. And that's what the accountants saying. They're saying that that is within international, whatever, accounting standards. The Premier League are disagreeing with that. So how much legal support the Premier League got for their cases is or accounting practice arguments they've got there for their case is a bit cloudy. Mm-hmm. And this is not an open and shut case, it could just end up with just a general discussion about it. And I think that could be very difficult for the Premier League to prove that you can tell an auditors that the auditors have treated it wrong. But if they signed it off and they're satisfied that it meets accounting guidelines, then who's the Premier League to disagree? The only thing to say about that is, the club has got 100 odd charges against them. Their auditors signed their accounts off as well, but the Premier League disagree with them. So, or because your auditors signed off accounts doesn't necessarily mean they're right from the Premier League's side. So this is complicated, this, and it's got ramifications that will flow into last year, as Joe was saying, and also this year and possibly next year. So it's an interesting one, but the sooner we hear about it, the better.
But do you not think the longer this goes on, could it not benefit Everton?
Absolutely.
More?
I think I've said before, I do wonder whether, and this is just my opinion, whether Everton are actually in a rush for this to get resolved in some cases, because that sort of supports their moral argument far better in terms of credibility of the Premier League. And the one thing we do know from this, in the way the Premier League has dealt with clubs, including Everton, is they can be flexible in terms of how they deal with clubs and sort of whether they breach PSR or what the as we well know. I mean, I know we were saying about Man United last week, but remember we breached in 2021, and the Premier League effectively let us off because they didn't want to go to another legal case and stuff like this. So I'm hoping in this that there's perhaps an agreement away from the commission, perhaps unofficial, that actually the last thing we want is a points deduction, another massive legal case, an appeal. Let's talk about it away from that and build it into some other agreement perhaps.
I'm sure the Premier League want to wash their hands of it as well, just to get it out the way.
It's cost, isn't it? And they've got other battles at the moment, haven't they? Far more, far more bigger battles, I would say. And also we know that there's other clubs who are in possible breach of PSR. They're going to have legal cases themselves. In other words, Premier League, just forget about Everton. You've been punished enough and move on. It just feels that we should be moving on from this. It's become a bit tiring, hasn't it? And I think we've been punished enough, and we have got a bit of a moral high ground the way the Premier League treated us.
Absolutely. Well, we've had a comment from Emma saying the podcast is getting more depressing by the minute. But stick around for the next segment because it's predictions. So this is going to be the best part for me. These are key points for the club's future, though, isn't it? Exactly.
Really? So you got to have the discussion. But thanks for listening.
Just before we move on to the next section, can I just answer something that someone tweeted me the other day as well?
Go for it, Joe.
Because I picked this up quite a lot in some of the reporting this summer. It's just on Jarrad Branthwaite and the uncertainty over his fitness stuff. And the question was basically, it's been very difficult to get proper information about the situation with Jarrad Branthwaite and his injury fitness. Why is that? And a few people kind of worried that almost as a protection of Jarrad Branthwaite with a view of selling him later in the window. Far too complicated a question for me to try and answer in 280 characters. I think the situation with Branthwaite is that he had a minor groin operation at the start of the summer. That wasn't particularly well known about. I don't think there's any sinister reason behind it. I think it's just the fact that attention was elsewhere. Back end of the friendlies with England, obviously Branthwaite goes away on holiday. The Euros takes precedent. There isn't really anyone at the club that you can ask for injury updates. It's not, and because it wasn't something we knew about at the time, it's not something that you're proactively asking for information about all the time. Since pre-season has started, it has been difficult to kind of get a real, real detail of answer about where he's at. But that isn't particularly unusual, not just with Everton, but with clubs in general. Trying to hone down on the specifics of an injury are quite difficult. Generally, clubs are quite reluctant to reveal that information. But, from the conversations that I've had, look, I don't think he's going to be ready for Brighton. I don't think he's a million miles off. I think we will see him, in the early stages of this season. And obviously, Deitch is desperate to have him back. From a sale perspective, obviously, Manchester United, we know that was interested at the beginning of the summer. I think that's disappeared a little bit. Obviously, they'd love to have him, but I think they're now in the process of signing De Ligt, having already signed Lenny Euro. And I certainly know from the players' camp that the focus is entirely on just getting back fit and getting back to playing football and playing football for Everton. So I don't think there's anything malign beneath the surface there. I think it's just simply that Everton know that he's one of their most important players and want to make sure they don't rush him back. I think from the player perspective, they know how big a season this could be for him. They don't want him to rush back and risk coming back too early. I think from a transfer perspective, I don't think there's any moves to proactively sell him or anything like that. But I do think with him, like anybody in the Everton squad and like most players these days, obviously if someone was to come in with an offer that was too good to turn down, then I think Everton would listen. I think they'd have to for some of the reasons we've already discussed on this podcast. But we're not at that stage yet.
Okay, well, we'll try and get to the questions as well because we are, where are we now, like 50 odd minutes in. So we're going to go through predictions for the season. I feel like we ever done this before the start of the season. Our expert analysis and predictions for the start.
Expert analysis, that's stretching the points.
Well, maybe. Let's speak for yourself, Cav.
Yeah, exactly.
So Everton predictions and then kind of overall predictions is what we're going to go through. I've briefed the guys on, each question. So we're going to go through it now. And I've even got a curveball. I messaged Chris Beasley because obviously he's a regular on the podcast as well, and he's submitted his predictions. So I'll obviously reveal mine, but I'm also going to reveal Chris Beasley's word for word of what he said. I just feel that excited for this part for some reason. Got no idea why. No idea why.
I wouldn't be having seen your predictions from here, by the way.
You can see that one. You can
stretching a point, I would say, on a couple of them.
Wait till we come. Wait till we come there. Don't be miserable, Gav. Let's be optimistic.
And I'm not necessarily about Everton, by the way.
Okay. We'll go around then for each one. Joe, we'll start with you.
Okay.
Everton's final league position. What is it going to be?
I'm going to go for 13th.
13th?
Yeah,
Ooh.
knocking on the door of the top half, but I don't think they quite get there. I don't think that anybody has a bigger range of potential than Everton in the Premier League this season. You know, I don't think they'll end up in trouble, but it's still a squad with, you know, with issues, with big gaps. It's still reliant on some older players who have started to get repeated injuries. It's reliant on them staying fit and being able to fill in the gaps. And it's reliant on new signs with limited experience. You know, whilst I think progress has been made this summer, and whilst progress was clearly made last year, I think this is still quite a fragile squad. But I do think it also I do think there is potential for a difficult season ahead if things were to go wrong. But I also think if things were to go right, this side has the potential to really, really push on and perhaps, you know, say knock on the door of the top half of the table, kind of get a firm foothold, a positive season, final season at Goodison, which they can then use as a springboard to break into the top half in the first season at the new stadium. So I think there are still too many issues in the squad for it to really push on and maybe, you know, challenge for top 8 or anything this season. But I think it'll be in that mid-table clutch of sides, which hopefully will be, you know, safe by Easter, and they can look to build on this transfer window. You know, have a head start on next summer's transfer window and really push on to excite us at the new stadium.
Okay, Gav.
We effectively finished, was it 11th last year with 48
12,
points?
yeah.
12, was it? Something like that. I'm expecting we could improve on that, but I'm going to, as Joe was saying, you know, that depends on the young players pushing through, perhaps, and Dice changing his style of play a little bit. So I'm going to go with a steady 11th. Interesting, I think we have done this before, and I think when we've just about Everton's league position, I think in the previous couple of years has been we're happy to finish 15th to 17th. So this is
it's a bonus.
This is progress, I think. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, I don't know any of Gav's or Joe's predictions. I do know Chris's, obviously, because he sent me them over. So mine is the same as Gav's. It is finishing 11th. You know, I think top 10 could be doable, but I didn't want to push. I don't want to be too optimistic, do you know what I mean? And push too much. So 11th. And Chris Beasley has gone 12th on the caveat that if Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Jarrad Branthwaite both stay as well. So I think fair enough on that one. So we've got our predictions down for where Everton going to finish. It'd be interesting. The end of the season, we can come back and listen to this podcast again. Player of the season, Joe, who have you got down for your predicted player of the season?
I'm going to go for Jack Harrison.
Okay.
Which I think might be a surprise a few people.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
I think that Harrison, he likes being at Everton. He's a good fit for Everton. Dyche likes him. I think that he struggled in the second half of last season, and I don't think we saw the best of him. I think that was for two reasons. One, because he started last season with a big injury, didn't have a pre-season last year, and I think he's really, really worked hard this summer to make the most of being able to have that opportunity. He was working hard out in Miami before he returned to Everton. He's looked sharp in pre-season. I also think another reason he struggled last season was the fact that Dyche clearly only trusted McNeil and Harrison out wide, and he overplayed them. When I look at this squad this year, I think that obviously Danjuma's gone and Dobbin's gone, but Dyche didn't really use them. And Dye's come in, Lindstrom's come in, so there are more options to rotate. There are more options to make, whether or not Dyche chooses to do this, because I think we've long discussed his lack of willingness to make substitutions, even when he perhaps has the options. But I think, you know, speaking to James Tarkowski about this on Saturday, and he was saying, you know, it feels like, and we saw a glimpse of this on Saturday, feels like for the first time in a couple of years, Everton have options to the bench. So if Harrison can be protected for a bit of rotation, you know, he can play the first 60 minutes. He's had a full pre-season. I think that'll keep him fresher for much longer. Yeah. And I also think we'll see a little bit of him in the number 10 role this season. I think that one of the more easier transitions for Dyche to make from Decore to Ndiaye might be to go from Decore to Harrison, who he still trusts defensively. And I think Lindstrom and Ndiaye, both out wide, give Harrison the opportunity to come into the middle where there's less pressure on him to beat a man. And I think if you have him there, especially if you've got Dominic Calvert-Lewin in front of him, and if you've got willing runners in Ndiaye, McNeil, and get Lindstrom either side of him, I think that could unlock a little bit more potential for creativity for Harrison, and I think we could have a good year.
Okay, let us know in the comments whether you agree with our predictions, and also get your comments, get your predictions in as well on the stream. Gav, player of the season?
I think if all things being equal and there's no departures from the club, you've got to say if players play to their potential, you've got to go no further than Branthwaite, haven't you?
Okay. Well, I'll say now.
That's good news. A, that he's still here, and B, that means that defensively we're probably pretty sound like we were last year, and ergo we will finish in mid-table again and possibly push on. So I'd go with Branthwaite, and that would be good news for us, Branthwaite.
Chris Beasley agrees with you. He's gone Branthwaite as well. Obviously, if he stays, which, fingers crossed he does, I'm going Illiman and Dai. He was going to be under my surprise player of the season, but I think...
You can have both. Yeah.
You can. He could be a surprise, yeah. Be surprised. But I've got a different surprise player, but I think player of the season, I think he could be a breath of fresh air. I think Decore is obviously either going to slip back further deeper, but I think he could struggle Decore as well this season, and depending on how Dyche wants to set up. I know he's had injury problems as well, but I think Illiman and Dai is going to come in, take his chance, and he's going to be the one, along with Lindstrom, by the way, but I think Dai could be the one who's the one that brings that ball forward for us, be a bit more progressive, have those shots on goal outside of the area, and yeah, he is my predicted player of the season. What's next? Surprise player of the season, Joe? Who have you gone for?
I'm going to go for Beto.
You've been desperate for this, haven't you? You've talked him up all pre-season.
Left field answers here.
Well,
Joe,
I've seen who Ian's gone for, and I think Ian's is a good shout.
Yeah.
But and I may well have gone for Ian's choice if he hadn't already gone for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to add a little bit of diversity to the conversation. He's desperate to do well. He looks raw. He's got a lot to prove, including, whilst I'm backing him here, I accept he's got a lot to prove. Like I think the jury's still out on him.
Yeah.
But this is his chance. This is a big chance to make it in England. I think that, he, like Dominic Calvert-Lewin, will benefit from having more creative players and more just players in general up the top end of the pitch around him, or at least potential for that with some of those wingers. And I think that he does have more ability than we perhaps given him credit for. And I think he'll build on last season. And I think, I think maybe he could be a player that kind of, gets 6 or 7 goals from combination of starting when Calvert-Lewin's not around and coming off the bench. I know people might say that's not a huge amount of goals, but if Everton have that in reserve. Yeah, I think that's where Everton's best chance this season, or the best sign of progress from Everton this season will be. I don't think Dominic Calvert-Lewin's going to go out and get 30 goals, but I think the best realistic scenario is he maybe gets 14, and then the likes of a handful of Beto, Lindstrom, and Dai, Harrison, McNeil, Decore all get 5, 6, and then that really helps Everton push on.
Okay, Gav.
Irabunum.
Yeah.
For me.
Could have been a clean sweep there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, not a lot of pre-season, but he looks like a really promising player. The only caveat to that goes back to Joe's point before about opportunities, and I think, like, if Branthwaite plays well, I think that's great for the club. I think if Irabunum is our most promising player, and in terms of the surprise package, that will also show that Dyche is moving the style and of the team on a little bit. And I think, that would be good news as well for lots of reasons. So, I'd say Irabunum, but you could be 2 or 3 there. I wasn't expecting Beto. But
I was.
Surprise. Surprise pick, probably. Yeah. Irabunum for me, but there could be 2 or 3, and let's face it, you can see possibly 2 of the 3 of the players coming in. You mentioned Ndai, you've got Lundstrom there, O'Brien. You've got 3 or 4 players there to hopefully pick from, of just the players that we brought in over the summer. But that's for me. I hope he has a good season.
I agree with Gav, and so does Chris Beasley. My surprise and my take on it is the fact that I'm already surprised at how much he's featured so much, because I thought he would be someone who would potentially build in to the season.
Club is surprised as well.
Okay.
Dyche, I mean, obviously they brought him hoping there was some potential for him, but he is genuinely surprised, Deitch, with how well he's adapted in pre-season.
I mean, if you look at the deals that we obviously conducted with Villa, Dobbin's already gone out on loan.
Yeah.
I think once I started reading up on how he was going to be used at Birmingham, I thought he could end up going out on loan here. But for me already, he looks like he could be a mainstay. Not right now. I think he'll gradually come into the team, but by the end of the season, he'll be a mainstay in that team for me.
Big opportunity for him, isn't there? Because Decore and Idrissa Gueye, both a bit older, both struggling with the odd injury here and there, and both in the last year of their contracts. So there's an opportunity there for him to make a real claim to. I know when he arrived, he spoke of the allure of helping the club move into the new stadium, and there's an opportunity there for him to be a big part of that.
Okay, quick fire on the next two. Where are we going to get to in the FA Cup, and where are we going to get to in the League Cup?
Everton get to the final of the FA Cup.
I mean, I don't know why I'm celebrating, but I thought you'd be a bit more.
Yeah, I reckon Everton get to the final of the FA Cup. Deitch just never got past. I mean, where did we get to with Fulham? Was it quarterfinals with Fulham?
That was the League Cup, wasn't it?
No, I know it was the League Cup. That was,
I don't think he's gone beyond.
That was the furthest he'd ever gone managing a team. I think a bit of momentum, a few nice draws. I reckon Everton get head of steam up in the cup. I think they get there. My big thing is because the FA Cup final is the same weekend as the final game at Goodison Park, and I can just see this mad scenario where he spent 8 months of planning for one spectacular send off, and all of a sudden it has to get moved to midweek because Everton are playing in the final on the Saturday and then can't play Southampton on the Sunday, and then I just think, actually, wouldn't that be really fitting if the final game at Goodison, the final Premier League game at Goodison, was under the lights?
I think it will be anyway. I agree.
And imagine if it was under the lights with a trophy and with Seamus Coleman lifting the trophy.
So you think we're going to win it as well? You're not even saying runners up?
I don't want to go
that far.
Obviously, it's weird. It's weird going that far because obviously we'd probably rather not be runner up. So I'm going to go for winning it. I was lucky. Spent a lot of time.
Look at what Joe's having.
I know.
Can I have some of that?
You know what? I spent a fair bit of time over pre-season speaking to Seamus Coleman in and around Coleman, and just so desperate for him to lift the trophy, and I know how much that would mean for him and just the fans and just Goodison. What a send off that would be! Just imagine, just think how difficult these past few years have been. How hard on and off the pitch, how much rubbish we've had to churn through, and a good chunk of it has been of the club's own making, but not all of it. The club's had so much bad luck on so many other facets of its operations as well. Maybe there's just some sort of cosmic karma and they've been storing it all up, and this is what it's leading to. If I can't get excited now, when can I get excited? Because I've already spent my weekend talking about takeovers that aren't going to happen because they can't, because Texter owns 45% of another club, and having to fend off points deduction claims that aren't anything new, but because they come out I've got to write something about them. Why can't we have this?
I'm absolutely made up Joe said this, but I'm also fuming because he's stolen me thunder as well. But anyway, so Joe thinks we're going to win the FA Cup.
Come on. Come on.
League Cup, where are we going to get there?
Oh, yeah, third round. That's it. It'll be the first day of winter in October and we'll lose at Salford or something like that.
Okay.
It'll just make the FA Cup win even sweeter.
FA Cup.
Can I just say like that before we play the third round?
We know where Gav's going.
You should get a tape of what Joe's just said.
It's on the film,
and send it to Dice and just say this is the team talk before the third round.
This is getting clipped. That's getting clipped.
This is.
Well, we know where Gav's going.
Yeah, we're getting
third round FA Cup.
But it would. There is. Yeah, you just don't know. I mean, it's so difficult to win cup competitions now. They're no longer the certain amount of randomness of them years ago. But I'm not sure whether there's, the same now. It's so difficult even just to get to the semi-final.
Well, I mean, Man United were a wild card winner last season, weren't they?
Yeah,
mid-table side, poor season.
Well, I get that.
Winners.
But I think it's rather difficult. I'd say
clip that and I'll be in trouble as well.
Early rounds. I've got to be specific here. League Cup, I'd say semi-final, possibly. I haven't got a clue why. FA Cup, early rounds.
Okay.
But, I mean, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Especially like the League Cup format. It's all over the place, isn't it? Because of Europe this year, which we'll talk about. But, yeah, I'd like to see a decent cup run. It'd be good to have, say, a League Cup semi-final at Goodison.
Aim for the stars.
Yeah, but
Don't say cup run, Gav. I can't
on.
stand it when people say cup run, to be honest.
Why?
Stars.
Because
Aim
what's the
higher.
point? You might as well just get knocked out in the third round.
I know. I think keeps interest, doesn't it, after Christmas? Look at last year. Fulham, what could it be?
Oh,
Penalty shootout? Could it be semi-final?
beginning of the end, that wasn't it?
Well, for one player, possibly. But, yeah.
Okay. Well, Chris has gone very, very mundane and miserable. Fourth round for both League Cup and FA Cup. So, standard Chris Beasley there.
Probably had him before his sandwiches.
Yeah, probably. Like I say, Joe, I think you've stolen me thunder. I'm just going to say what's going to happen, and then I'm just going to replay what you said, because it was perfect. I said FA Cup quarter-finals, but I don't know what's in this water, Gav, to be honest.
They got the,
You've got the
short straw,
yeah.
didn't I?
I've said League Cup winners, based on everything Joe said. Trophy at Goodison Park under the lights for the final game, showing it off after or half-time or whatever. Just think of that, the goosebumps that you'd feel at the time.
I think FA Cup I do. 'Cause I
FA
think League
Cup
Cup holds a bit more, in a weird way, I think League Cup is almost holds a bit more importance to managers, because it's the early one in the seasons where you can build a bit of steam. I think a lot of managers are expected to win trophies, but obviously it's a crowded field. Know how much Mourinho was very good at this. How much pressure he could take off himself by winning what you probably say was a minor competition early doors.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You know, but FA Cup, that's it. Everton, you know what? Mid-table safety. Well, the top 8 fight for their European positions. Everton come up on the blind side, and I tell you, when Beto breaks through in the 85th minute and scores that winner pass, I don't know, Nick Pope or Emi Martinez, you're going to turn to me and you're going to go,
we're manifesting it now already. I can feel it. Emma said, Joe, you're giving her goosebumps, but Dave Max says Joe's on the lunchtime drinking as well.
Absolutely. You know, that's it. I tell you, when it's Palace away on the 4th of January and we've just lost 3-0, and Beto's probably scored all 3 own goals, I'm going to look like a right idiot, aren't I?
Okay, well, we'll have to... we'll quick fire these.
Say it. Joe's answers have been so spectacularly unexpected.
Yeah, I agree.
Actually, this is
That's
like
why he stole me thunder.
This is a pod in itself. We should have had this as a pod.
This should be part 2. Maybe
Joe goes large.
Maybe we'll do this section as a separate pod for the audio.
Okay.
Might have to, because we are running over a little bit.
It's because Joe's got so excited.
He got very excited.
By
the way, when we won the cup in '66, I think 33 and '66, we were 11th. That's it, when we won the cup. And in '84, we were 11th going into our final game. And so there you go.
Okay. Well, we'll quick fire these. You don't have to give too much description or whatever. Overall predictions then for the season itself. I'll just start off with this. So, Premier League winners, I'm going to go Arsenal. And I think, just very quickly, obviously, for City to do another one to make it 6. But I also think the points deduction here may have a factor in
City
form.
get relegated?
No, I'm not getting City relegated, but I think
-30.
they might have some sort of...
They are in the bet market to get relegated, aren't they, City?
Are they?
Yeah.
I just think it might affect them mentally, like it has done with us. I still think they're a fantastic team, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win the league. But I think if Arsenal probably don't do it this season, they may never go on to do it. And I'm never ever predicting a United or a Liverpool to win the leave on an Everton pod. I'm never going to do that. So Arsenal for me. Chris Beasley's gone. Manchester City. Who are you going for, Joe?
Arsenal.
Yeah, Everton.
Pledge.
Going Arsenal as well, yeah.
I was just going to touch Joe's Echo Cup and go Everton. Whatever the opposites of a poison chalices. I will go for. I can't say further than Man City, but I might go with Arsenal because I think this is the opportunity for them, isn't it? Really, but I felt like that was the case last year. City. It was a little bit undercurrent, but yeah, Arsenal for me, and I think it'd be good for the Premier League.
Okay, Champions League teams top 4. I've gone Manchester City, Arsenal, Liverpool, and Chelsea.
Chelsea. Yeah,
maybe surprise for them. I can't see past the 3 teams firstly just mentioned. I think Chelsea, you could see they were getting better last season as the season went on. Obviously, had a difficult season. I know they got a new manager, so they could be an unknown entity, but wouldn't be surprised. I can't see United doing that. I can't see Tottenham doing that either. So it kind of just leaves me with Chelsea as the fourth. I mean, Villa are there, obviously. Don't discount Villa. But Chelsea, for me, would make up the top four. Chris Beasley has gone. City, Arsenal, Liverpool, same as me. And then his fourth is Manchester United.
Arsenal, City, Liverpool, Villa.
Okay, Villa again, yeah?
Yeah.
I go with Lee's choice. I think Villa, I think the would maybe touch on it, the expanded Champions League.
It's going to be a problem for them, isn't it?
Is it Champions League is a drain if you've not played it anyway. But I think the expanded Champions League of like where everybody plays, whatever it is, 10, 11 games.
All those tired legs that Everton surge through in the FA Cup in January.
That's it, yeah. So I think the top, those Bees' four would be my four, to be honest with you.
Okay, 3 relegated teams. I've gone with 3. I put 2 in brackets, so I don't want to sit on the fence too much.
That's cheating, isn't it?
No, okay. I'll just
the course of the Premier League in that.
Okay,
you're really pushing the boat out there.
I'll just name the 3 for the purpose of the pod: Ipswich, Southampton, and Leicester. Chris Beasley has gone the exact same as well. He's mentioned in his that Leicester are, but Leicester facing a points deduction before they even kick a ball as well, potentially. So, who are your 3? Gav won't let me mention the other 2.
The records you may as well, potentially.
Well, I just said maybe Brentford, and I think maybe Bournemouth because they've lost Solanke as well, but depends on what happens. But they're my 3. I'm not discounting Ipswich, Southampton and Leicester to go down.
Ipswich, Leicester, and...
Thinking about this one, isn't he?
Yeah, I am a little bit, because there are a few sides it could go wrong for. You know what? You know what? I might go. See, Forest are a bit like Everton, where they have a big range because they got such, Alanga and Morgan Gibbs White are so talented, but they were a mess last season, weren't they? But I Bournemouth without Solanke, I know there's a lot of positivity around Bournemouth, and they think that Iraola's kind of taking them on to the next level, but Solanke's a handful, isn't he? It's a big job to replace him. If I was them, I'd probably look at one of the Luton forwards, maybe Morris or Adebayo, but I think Bournemouth might struggle. So yeah, I'm going to go Bournemouth.
Okay, Gav, your 3.
Payback for that week of hell.
I was going to say,
Lampard.
in keeping with Joe's sort of best described as erratic approach to these answers, I would kind of say, I'm surprised that they go with Ipswich, Southampton and Everton to get relegated. So like the last day of the season, last home game with the FA Cup and relegated, has been known to happen, as we well know, to a former Everton manager. I will go with I can't see more than the 3 teams, sadly, for the Premier League as a competitive arena. I can't see more than the 3 who are coming up again. It's such a big gap now, isn't it? And we say about on theory it's a bit stronger than last year because of the teams have come up. We've got recent Premier League experience, but I don't think Leicester and Southampton, the teams they're coming up with, are the teams who went down with. Like say Leicester have got no Maddison, have they, and a few others, and
new manager as well,
of a points deduction. And I think it'd be really sad. But you don't know if Ipswich might come in and be like a bit of a brine with it. McKenna's have got a great reputation. Might come up and surprise a few people. But all things being equal, I go with them. Those 3 who came up, sadly.
Okay, well, in the overall predictions, I've obviously included FA Cup winners and League Cup winners because I didn't think Joe was going to go with Everton as an FA Cup winner. So FA Cup winner, I've gone Chelsea. League Cup winner, as previously stated, I predicted Everton to win the League Cup. So they're my 2 picks. Joe's picked Everton as his FA Cup winner. Who's your League Cup winner?
City.
Manchester City. Gav?
I'm going to go with City for both.
City for both?
Yeah.
Absolute standout season again for City. Well, you went for Arsenal, didn't you, to win the league?
Yeah,
so.
It could be interesting to City this year. I know they always go into the season under cup, but there's a few, there's a little bit of unease, isn't there? I think in the camp over a number of things, but the financial resources Pep doesn't have give them a big advantage. You'd be a fool to bet against them.
Yeah, I nearly missed off Chris Beasley's predictions there. He's predicted Arsenal to win the FA Cup and Manchester City to win the League Cup as well. Okay, we'll finish off predictions with European predictions. Champions League winner. Champions League winners. You were briefed on these, Joe. You should have your answers ready.
Champions League winners. Not Real again. But then do I really want to pick an English side of the ones that are available? I'm going to say Bayern Munich.
Okay.
Harry Kane will get
potentially a pick for me, but didn't go with them.
Yeah, just say that was it 225 games next year in the Champions League? You know, another 100 more than this year. As if it's like so exciting that you need another 100 games, really. Let's get off my chest. That's my major issue, gripe about the new season. I will go with. I was thinking what Joe was saying. I think it'd be nice to see Harry Kane get a trophy by and got to the semi-final within a few minutes of knocking out Real Madrid, weren't he, last year?
Controversial,
Yeah. I think it'd be good for Bayern to win it, and Harry Kane's get a Champions League in his medal.
They were definitely under consideration for me, but I just thought with Kane and his age and everything else, I still think he'll have a good season, but they had a poor season on their standards, Bayern Munich last year. I know they got to a semi-final.
They didn't win the Bundesliga.
That's like the first time in like 10 years or something like that, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay, my pick is Manchester City. I feel like they're going to have, this is just a prediction, but they're going to have a bit of a torrid time around Christmas and the New Year with this, like as mentioned, the hearing. But then they're going to, they're going to go on to win a trophy at the end, and it'll be the Champions League. So Manchester City is my pick. Europa League.
Jesus, Ian.
What?
Yeah.
What?
DFB,
Northwest Counties.
DFB Pokal Cup. Yeah. Copa del Rey.
Chris Beasley's picked at Real Madrid. And he also pointed out for the Europa League, we don't really know who's going to end up in this competition.
Oh, thanks for that, Chris.
Because 8 teams from the Champions League.
Yeah, and I still think that some teams are qualifying as well, aren't they? But he's picked Manchester United.
Yeah, I'll go with United just to speed things up.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
I've gone with our counterparts at the weekend, Roma.
Oh, yeah, that's a shout.
Yeah, because they did get to the final the other year, didn't they?
Yeah. They've had a couple of European finals.
Okay, we're not going to have time to read out questions. I do apologise. We have gone on a lot longer than I originally thought because we are about 1 hour 20 minutes into the podcast now, but we are going to have to shoot off. So, any final remarks, lads, before we go? Obviously, a lot discussed there. This is actually my last pod for like 2 weeks because I'm on holiday
again
from Wednesday.
So hang on a minute, right? I know you've been away a couple of times recently
but
as well.
Like, so in spades.
You give him Bees loads of stick because he's never in, and I've had at least a couple of breaks I know of in the last few weeks, and now going on holiday for what, a fortnight?
Spades. I've been off like a Thursday, Friday.
You're not missing Brian, are you?
I am, unfortunately. I don't know how I've done this. It's not my fault. It's families have booked holidays, and it's been like, Ian, you come, and it's like, yeah, oh crap, it's the first day of the day. That's why I was really annoyed, by the way, that we didn't have our first home game of the season as the second game of the season. Do you know what I mean?
So they should fix the fixture list around your holidays, you mean, yeah?
Exactly.
You tell me you've booked the FA Cup final holiday for that weekend
as
well.
What a weekend you missed there.
Absolutely not.
Everton win the trophy.
Yeah, I mean, you can hold the fort by yourself, Joe, and we'll get Gav in. Chris will be back. It'll be fine. It'll be good. It'll be all good.
It's not the same without your presenting skills.
Well, we've got stuff in place to make sure that we do carry on with the podcast, audio and video on YouTube as well. So Joe's just going to need a little bit of encouragement. Gav's going to need a little bit of encouragement. Without me here, I'm back on the 27th of August, right in time for the Bournemouth away game to preview that, and hopefully we'll be speaking about...
Yeah. And I haven't said all that, I'll be away then.
Well, there you go. So Gav's away. All these holidays. Right, okay, we are going to finish off. Any final remarks? Are we good?
I don't think there's any final remarks. I think every remark I've needed about football ever has been in this podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for sticking for this extra long podcast. It has been much appreciated. This has been the Royal Blue Podcast. Joe, thank you. Gav, thank you. I've been Ian Croll, and we will see you soon.